Welcome to the 700 Club. Bombshell proof or a total dud? Both sides are furiously spinning Ambassador Gordon Sondland's testimony. Democrats are claiming a win, while Republicans say the testimony totally exonerates Trump. So what gives, and where do we go from here? Abigail Robertson explains the whole story.
Today's proceedings will have a tough time overshadowing Wednesday's headlines. Both sides are claiming victory following Ambassador Gordon Sondland's testimony. Republicans maintain his account provides proof President Trump was not involved in any quid pro quo, while Democrats argue the exact opposite.
And I'm worried that the bigger picture is being ignored.
I think today's testimony is among the most significant evidence to date.
Chairman Adam Schiff claims this as a very important moment for the impeachment inquiry.
It was the conditioning of official acts for something of great value to the president, these political investigations. It goes right to the heart of the issue of bribery, as well as other potential high crimes or misdemeanors. But we also have heard for the first time that knowledge of this scheme was pervasive.
While Republicans flag this point made repeatedly by Sondland.
The president never told you about any preconditions for the aid to be released?
No.
Sondland claims he thought a quid pro quo existed, but not in regards to holding up aid.
As I testified previously, Mr. Giuliani's requests were a quid pro quo for arranging a White House visit for President Zelensky. Mr. Giuliani demanded that Ukraine make a public statement announcing the investigations of the 2016 election, DNC server, and Burisma.
He then eventually presumed the hold on security assistance played a part as well.
That was my presumption, yeah.
Sondland testified Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and Vice President Mike Pence were involved, adding Pence shared his concerns of withholding military aid.
Everyone was in the loop,
prompting this response from the vice president.
I made no comments in my meeting with President Zelensky concerning any investigations or tying investigations to U.S. aid to Ukraine. And I have no recollection of any discussion with Ambassador Sondland before that meeting.
Sondland did make clear he never got a presidential directive.
My testimony is I never heard from President Trump that aid was conditioned on an announcement of elections.
And recounted on a phone call with President Trump, he asked point blank what Trump wanted from Ukraine.
He said, I want nothing. I want no quid pro quo. I just want Zelensky to do the right thing, to do what he ran on.
President Trump declared Sondland's testimony exoneration.
I want nothing. That's what I want from Ukraine. That's what I said. I want nothing. I said it twice.
House Democrats tell me they believe the testimonies heard thus far will lead to enough votes to impeach the president. What's not so clear, though, is what will then take place when impeachment moves to trial in the Senate. Reporting from Capitol Hill, Abigail Robertson, CBN News.
Well, thanks, Abigail. David Brody joined us now to talk about the impeachment inquiry and last night's Democratic debate. David, you know, Mitch McConnell has said there are plenty of Republicans in the Senate. They are about to throw over their own man with an election coming up, and they're talking about the possible Supreme Court nomination. I mean, the whole thing is an exercise in futility. How do you read it?
Well, I think a lot of eyes right now in Washington are on that red wall we hear so much about in the Senate, you know, whether or not there are going to be 20 Republican senators to convict President Trump after the House impeaches him. The answer is no. As a matter of fact, the answer is a big flat no. As a matter of fact, it's a big, bold, big 18 font no, maybe one, maybe two, and that's pushing it. And there are not going to be any Republicans in the House that go for impeachment. And so that's kind of where Washington is looking right now. But look, Pat, when it comes to all of this impeachment situation, it's funny. Was there damage yesterday? Yes. But the question is, was it damage to Trump or was it damage to Democrats? I mean, Sondland had some bombshells for sure. But both sides, as Abigail was explaining, are really claiming victory on that. And I think the whole thing ends up being a wash. And I got to tell you, you wonder about the American people. We've seen polls here, Pat. It's just not moving the needle. You go back to the 1970s and Richard Nixon, and you had the Saturday Night Massacre, and you had the tapes, you had bombshells, you had smoking guns, and then public support for impeachment increased after the hearings. You don't have that this time. A big difference.
Well, you know, it's kind of like, who cares about Ukraine for starters? And this is one call by the president to one president, and the most they can get is, he said, would you do me a favor? Well, I mean, that's just not impeachable, in my opinion.
Pat, it's a lot of hearsay. It's a lot of second-hand, third-hand, fourth-hand. You got a lot of presumed. I thought 2 + 2 = 4. All of that. But what do you have the actual president of the United States saying? And, of course, Donald Trump in that wonderful, I say wonderful, it's kind of funny, actually, a handwritten note reading to the cameras. I like how he says, are the cameras rolling? Of course they're rolling. They're always rolling with Donald Trump. And he says, I want nothing. I want nothing. And going back to Richard Nixon, it's interesting. I mean, look at the apples-to-apples scenario, right? 2019, you have Donald Trump actually saying to Gordon Sondland, I want nothing. I want no quid pro quo. He actually tells someone, go and tell the truth, is what he says. 1972, we have the tape with Nixon, and Nixon telling officials on the tape that he wants the FBI to stop the Watergate break-in investigation. Look, that's apples to apples, and that's why this is going nowhere at this point in terms of public opinion. They're still going to impeach him, Pat. At least that's the plan.
Well, David, we've got Thanksgiving coming up. We've got Christmas coming up. We've got the Congress is certainly will go into a recess, and then they come out, and they've got several senators who are going to be trying to get to be president. And if they have to come for a Senate impeachment hearing, I mean, this whole thing's a nightmare for them.
Well, that's right. As a matter of fact, that really helps Pete Buttigieg, who won't have to be in the U.S. Senate during any sort of trial, and also Joe Biden. Now, they can be in Iowa. They can be in New Hampshire. I mean, this is not good news for Elizabeth Warren, for sure, and Bernie Sanders, who will have to both be there. But look, as it relates to what the Democrats did on stage last night, boy, that was I'll be honest with you, I wasn't sure which was more boring, the Democrat debate or the impeachment hearings. I mean, they were really kind of giving a run for their money. I couldn't decide. I will tell you one thing. I definitely came to the conclusion last night after watching that. Joe Biden was just, I mean, it was atrocious, Pat. I mean, his first question, he was stumbling through his first softball question, and then it just it just spun out of control, especially at the end of the debate where he had gaffe after gaffe. We've kind of rolled a few together. Have a look.
The only African-American woman that ever been elected to the United States Senate. A whole range of people.
No,
my point is,
that's not true. The other one is here.
No man has a right to raise a hand to a woman in anger other than in self-defense, and that's rarely ever occurs. And so we have to just change the culture, period, and keep punching at it and punching at it and punching at it.
This week I hear him literally say that I don't think we should legalize marijuana. I thought you might have been high when you said it. and let me tell you, because marijuana...
You know, how will you say it? But look, you know, there's a statement, familiarity breeds contempt. And the more we get familiar with those guys, the more contemptible they all are. Their programs are just ridiculous. And so going into the election, how can they possibly do it? They don't have a viable candidate.
Well, that's why we hear all this talk about Michael Bloomberg getting in the race. We've heard Michelle Obama. We've even heard Hillary Clinton. I believe that's gone to the Oi Gavolt level when I hear that. But the point is that Democrats are looking for something, anything. This was Joe Biden. He was supposed to be the guy, but it's just not working. And so who has filled some of that energy, that vacuum, if you will? Well, Pete Buttigieg, who is trying to play that moderate card. Look, Pat, this just in, newsflash, he's not a moderate at all. He's for the Green New Deal. He's for partial birth abortion. I can go down. He wants to abolish the Electoral College. But he is a very, very good candidate he's kind of Barack Obama-ish, if you will, in terms of rhetoric, playing to the better angels. He's the guy that I think has been actually their best candidate in terms of oratory skills. But I got to tell you, this thing, who knows where this is going, but I can tell you this, Donald Trump could be the first impeached president to win re-election ever in United States history at this point.
David, I totally agree. I think he's going to coast to victory when it's all over with. And this whole impeachment thing, the American people have had enough of it. But as I said, familiarity breeds contempt, and boy, oh boy, they're just lathering it on. David, thank you so much.
You bet, Pat.
Well, in other news, Israel is one step closer to holding an unprecedented third election in 1 year. Think of that, third election in 1 year. John Jessup has more.
Pat, Blue and White Party leader Benny Gantz failed to form a government before last night's deadline. Avigdor Lieberman, seen as a kingmaker because of his Yisrael Beitenu party, has enough seats to give either side a majority, refuses to endorse Gantz or Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Efforts to strike a compromise have also failed. Gantz refuses to form a government with Netanyahu as long as he's facing indictment on corruption charges, and Netanyahu won't abandon the religious parties in order to share power with Lieberman. And Pat, as you were saying earlier, the deadlock leading now to an unprecedented third election in under a year.
Well, I think this Lieberman has got to be, I mean, sooner or later, the people in Israel will turn on him. You cannot have one guy with a little splinter that's holding up the whole process. And it seems to be just an exercise in egotism. But this is Israel. But it's just amazing that. But I think that together, Benny Gantz, who I know personally is a very nice man and a strong patriot and a strong leader, and Bibi Netanyahu, again, I've met with a number of times, and he's a good friend. And I think the two of them will have to get together and form a coalition. The Israeli people have just had enough of this, but that's the scene. But Lieberman, you know, is just looking like, as I say, an exercise in egotism, and it sort of turns your stomach to see one person who would say, I'm going to hold a whole country hostage, and what are you asking for? Well, he doesn't really say, and that's the worst thing of all of it.